back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for all right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final.
Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth, and it's great to have you guys here on this Wednesday, January 29th. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into all that, just want to remind you guys to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining. Between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers, we appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day. So any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net. That is gsmcpodcast.net. So let's get into what we're going to discuss for today. So we're going to start off the show. We're going to talk about Michael Irvin's reaction to the Cowboys hiring Brian Schottenheimer to be their next head coach. We'll also talk about why the Eagles fare better against the Chiefs this time around. This will be the second meeting between these two teams in the last 3 years in the Super Bowl. So I'll talk about the reasons why they have a better chance of beating the Chiefs this time around. Then we'll also get into talking about, who was the most disappointing team in the playoffs this season. What playoff performance was the most disappointing? So we'll get into that. We'll talk about the Saints, as they are the only team left without a head coach and who could possibly end up taking that job. And then in the final part of the show, we're just going to take a look at the Pro Bowl rosters, break them down. Obviously, the Pro Bowl is not what it used to be, but it is this week, so we'll, get into that, and I'll give you my thoughts on, some of the replacements that were announced as well. So we'll get into all that. So let's get into the first topic, which is discussing Michael Irvin and his reaction to the Cowboys hiring Brian Schottenheimer. And he was one of those people that was not happy with the hire. In his words, he said it was a missed opportunity. And, he put a video out there. It's on YouTube. And this is some of the quotes from him. This is courtesy of a CBS article. So, yeah, this was on his YouTube channel. And he said, "Here's my issue. We lost an opportunity here. I don't know what will happen with Coach Schottenheimer and the Dallas Cowboys, but Jerry is a shrewd businessman, and the opportunity, I'm shocked he did not see this, or he did not see." He also said, he's talking about Cowboy fans now. They've lost a generation of fans. That's 30 years. 40 years is a generation. Right here, right now, was a critical mass. It was time to bring somebody in here that could shake things up and grab that last leg of Cowboys Nation. Which, yeah, a lot of people view that as he didn't by promoting Schottenheimer. He also said, if we get 30 years right now, life expectancy is 100 years. That means by math, a third of Cowboys Nation has never felt or lived the glory of a championship story. Don't even know about it. How can they pass something down if they don't even know about it? It's a generation that knows nothing about a championship from the so-called America's team. And worse yet, that generation has seen total domination from a team named the Kansas City Chiefs. Not only are you losing football games over here and opportunities over here, even divisions over here, you're about to get our moniker snatched off our backs. I was pushing for Deion Sanders to be the next head coach, and I still stand 10 toes down on that push. So, yeah, he was a big advocate for Deion Sanders. And I know there was reports out there that Deion Sanders spoke with Jerry Jones, and, Michael Irvin, we saw headlines that, he was pushing for it. He was pushing Jerry to hire Deion Sanders. But that did not happen. And it doesn't surprise me because I don't know how I don't think a Deion Sanders-Jerry Jones relationship would have worked in Dallas. I just don't think. Now, Deion Sanders as a player is much different. But as a coach, Deion is going to want to have control over the team. And Jerry Jones would not allow that. With Brian Schottenheimer, Jerry calls the shots. So, some more quotes from Michael Irvin. The Raiders hired Pete Carroll. He had some experience. Last time when we did Mike McCarthy, he had some experience. I got to slap myself and say, give it a chance. At least they walked the walk already. Brian hadn't walked no walk. Yeah, I mean, you're bringing in a guy that does not have head coaching experience. And if you take a look at some of the other candidates that probably would have been considered, they didn't have head coaching experience either. You had Kellen Moore, who's been a coordinator, and then you have Jason Witten, who is a leader, but has no head coaching experience whatsoever at this level. So, and there's also a quote from Des Bryant, or a tweet from Des Bryant in the article as well. He said, I honestly don't know how to feel right now. I'm trying to understand what Jerry meant by saying he was all in. Maybe the coach is good, maybe he's not. But my energy towards how the Cowboys have been mixing things doesn't feel like success anytime soon. See, it's very telling when you have former players speaking in this light of the Cowboys. You got Michael Irvin, you got Des Bryant speaking out, who got into it a little bit with Kayvon Thibodeau on social media, on Twitter, which, why? You know, just meaningless beef. But anyways, you got those two guys speaking out. And let's not forget, when I talked about Troy Aikman and what he said, I think it was before the Rams-Vikings playoff game, how the head coaching job for the Cowboys may be not as coveted of a job as you may think. And what's the common denominator? It's Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones is not going to shake things up and bring in someone that is going to have a say. He's not. And he's proven that time and time again. Now, bringing in McCarthy had experience, but ultimately, McCarthy was kind of, begging for the job because, he was out of football for a year and he wanted the job. And we'll talk about McCarthy a little bit later in the show because he's going to be without a job once again, and we'll explain why. But Jerry was ultimately going to call the shots with McCarthy too. And it looked like they were going to bring Mike McCarthy back. And then all of a sudden, they couldn't agree on years, and that was it. So they just figured, we're going to promote Brian Schottenheimer. Dak Prescott is a fan of Schottenheimer. And in Jerry's world, everything is right. But for me, the Cowboys I'm with Michael Irvin. The Cowboys really need to shake things up and bring in someone that is going to be a difference maker. And you had a couple of options out there. But as long as Jerry Jones is in charge, nothing is going to change. Nothing's going to change. Because, listen, I was an advocate. I think every team at the top of their list should have been Pete Carroll and, when Belichick was still out there, Belichick. Those were the two guys that should be at the top of everybody's list. Now, I know some people think that Belichick lost his fastball. Pete Carroll obviously was out for the year. Didn't coach last year. But, if I'm a team that needs someone that can steer my team in the right direction, I'm going to take a chance. But other teams were willing to do that, like the Raiders, and obviously Belichick's in college now. But with Jerry Jones, it's not going to happen. Now, I don't think the Cowboys, it's too early to tell. They were disappointing this year. I thought they were going to be, how they've always been, a good regular season team. You make the playoffs and you get knocked out. So next year, we'll see what happens. But you'll have Dak Prescott healthy. CeeDee Lamb was banged up towards the end of the year. And they had guys on the defense get hurt. Guys were injured to start the year too. Right? They didn't get Deron Bland back till later in the year. And Deron Bland in 2023 was awesome with all his pick sixes. So, a healthy Cowboys team next year. You add a couple of pieces on both sides of the ball. And, maybe they're back to how they've been in the regular season. But nothing more. And the division's going to be better. I mean, the Commanders are not going anywhere now. So you got to deal with them and the Eagles. But I don't think the Cowboys are that far off from making it back to the playoffs. I don't. I mean, they could fall into a trap of being top-heavy because, their top guys are making a lot of money, and that could strain them from making other moves. But also the other thing, too, is, in general, they just don't dip their toes in free agency. The only moves that they made, it was Eric Kendricks, and, they brought in Dalvin Cook. I'm trying to think of who else. Who else did they bring in? Well, they brought back Zeke. But they also did sign Dalvin Cook. And, these former players of the Cowboys, they've used Jerry's quote against them. Because he said they're all in. Well, we're still trying to figure out what that means. Because you didn't specify. You went out and you signed your players, but you made a couple of moves in free agency that weren't needle movers. So what were you talking about? And this coaching hire is not a needle mover. It's not. Now, again, that does not mean that the Cowboys are going to be bad next year. They could be one of those teams that bounces back. But in terms of being a Super Bowl contender, they are not categorized as that. And like I said, it's very telling when you have former players speaking out against the ownership. So, Troy Aikman didn't mention Jerry Jones by name when I brought up his quote from before. Michael Irvin did. Des Bryant did. They're taking direct shots at him. But he doesn't care. So, let me know what you guys think, though, about what Michael Irvin had to say, what Des Bryant had to say. What are some of your early predictions for the Cowboys next year? What do you think they have to do to improve this team? I think running back, maybe another weapon opposite of CeeDee Lamb, because Brandon Cooks is getting older. You could always add the defense. But let me know in the comments what you think. So we are going to take our first break of the show now, and then when we come back, we will talk about the Super Bowl again and why the Eagles can beat the Kansas City Chiefs in this Super Bowl, why they have a better chance of beating the Chiefs in this Super Bowl as opposed to the last time. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we're going to talk about why the Eagles have a better chance of beating the Chiefs this time around. Obviously, this is the second time these two teams will be meeting in the Super Bowl in a few years. But I do believe that the Eagles have a better chance to knock off the Chiefs this time. And I think a lot of people have those same feelings as well. Now, reason number one is Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley, I mean, he has had an unbelievable season. There's no question about it. And he was probably the best signing of the offseason. Not probably, he was. Because of the impact that he had on this team. Now, the Eagles, they were a pretty good rushing team in 2022. I mean, I think they were still one of the best. But I feel like with Barkley, that running game has been taken to new heights. The New Heights podcast. And I feel like the Chiefs will have their hands full with Barkley. Now, obviously, you're giving Steve Spagnuolo a couple of weeks to game plan. So the Chiefs are going to come up with something. You know, maybe they do contain Barkley a little bit. But they're not going to completely shut him down. They're not. Barkley's going to have a couple of big plays in this game. You know, whether it is running the football or through the air. That's the other thing, too. Barkley is a good receiver as well. So that's another dimension to this team that they're going to have to deal with. On top of already, you have to deal with A.J. Brown, and you got to deal with Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, and Jalen Hurts if he runs with the football. Because, again, last year, you know, you had Miles Sanders, or no, not last year, a couple of years ago, you had Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell. I think I have the stats of the running backs from that Super Bowl. I think I took a screenshot of it. I thought I did, because I saw... Maybe I was wrong. It doesn't... Yeah, I guess I didn't have him. Because I thought I had the rushing stats saved from the Super Bowl. I mean, I could just look it up now. But, I mean, Saquon Barkley is better than all those running backs combined. And I think, like I said, the Chiefs are going to have their hands full. But we'll have to wait and see. So, all right. So I got the box score here from the previous Super Bowl between these two teams. And they ran the ball for 115 yards in total. Jalen Hurts was actually their leading rusher. He had 70 yards on the ground. He had 3 rushing touchdowns. I think all of them, were all of them tush pushes? I think they all were tush pushes. Kenneth Gainwell had 21 yards on the ground. Miles Sanders had 16. Boston Scott had 8. So, taking Hurts out of the equation, they had a combined, if my math is correct, 45 rushing touchdowns, or 45 rushing yards. Yeah, 45 rushing touchdowns in the game. Yeah, they had 45 rushing yards. 3 running backs combined. That's not going to happen in this game. Saquon Barkley is going to get over that. Now, there has been a game where he had 1 rushing yard, because I saw a clip from the New Heights podcast when they had Barkley on, and they asked him the question if an average person could get 1 yard as a running back. And, you know, Barkley said, you know, maybe. But then he said, you know what, there was one game, and it was against the Jets, where he had, what did he have, like 13, I think it was 13 carries for 1 yard. He said, yeah, never mind. So, yeah, there has been games where Barkley has been shut down, but I don't think the Chiefs are going to shut him down. I think Barkley is going to have a good game. So, that's one reason. And then the other reason is this defense. This defense has been one of the most improved units from year to year. You know, because last year, I mean, towards the end of the season, the Eagles' defense was horrible. It was bad. And Vic Fangio has done a great job with this defense. Because in the beginning of the year, it got off to a rough start. But the defense needed some time to gel. And it did eventually gel. And now, they're one of the best in the league. Their pass defense is really good. That's from their pass defense to their front four. They could be getting Brandon Graham back for this game. Now, if he does come back, he's not going to play that much. He's going to be on a limited snap count. But, they're a solid unit. Jalen Carter, look at what he's done very well in the postseason. Nolan Smith coming off the edge. This pass rush gets after you. And the pass rush that they had against Mahomes in the previous Super Bowl was pretty good too, because you had, at least 4 guys with double-digit sacks. You had Hassan Reddick, you had Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham. Who else? Who else am I missing? I don't think. Josh Sweat, who they still have. So, yeah, this pass rush is going to get after Mahomes. And I think I've said it. What worries me going into this game for the Chiefs is a little bit of the offensive line. Is the offensive line going to have issues protecting Mahomes in this game? Now, I did bring this up, but the last time they met, Mahomes was not 100%. He was hurt. Suffered that high ankle sprain in the divisional round against the Jaguars. So he was a little hobbled. Now, he did have that big scramble at the end of the game that set up the game-winning field goal. But he wasn't 100%. In this game, he's 100%. So you got to factor that in. And, Mahomes was using his legs on Sunday, and he's going to be using it a ton, you would imagine. He'd have a couple of big scrambles in this game as well. So the Eagles got to prepare for that, which, look, I said Spagnuolo has 2 weeks to prepare, so does Vic Fangio. But I think this defense, from their secondary to their linebackers to their front four, it's a solid unit. And, also you got Zach Bond, who's an underrated signing, one of their linebackers, who made an All-Pro. Like I said, they are a solid unit. And, Howie Roseman, they did a great job fixing this defense. You drafted the 2 young corners. Like I said, you signed Zach Bond. And, like I said, it's made a difference. And they changed their coordinators. I said going into the year, this Eagles team was going to be really good. They were going to bounce back from that collapse. And obviously, I don't think it was that bold of a take. It wasn't. But I think there were people going into the year that were down on the Eagles. Didn't trust Nick Sirianni. Didn't trust Jalen Hurts. I think there's still some reasons not to trust Jalen Hurts. But, Jalen Hurts had a good game on Sunday. And he hasn't turned the ball over. So, and I get it. Because there are some games where, the stats, he doesn't light it up with the stats. But, there are some games where he doesn't have to. When you have Saquon Barkley running the football like he's running it. Look at Jimmy Garoppolo in the championship game back in 2019 against the Packers. Raheem Mostert had over 200 yards rushing. And what, you're just going to take the ball out of his hands and put it in Garoppolo's hands when, you got that working? Now, no offense to Garoppolo, but I'm just saying, Garoppolo, what did he complete, 2 passes in that game? So, that's the thing. The Eagles' running game is the best that it's been in the Jalen Hurts era. Because he's a part of it, but you also have an all-world talent in Saquon Barkley. So, but I look, if you know me and you saw, how I had my bracket turning out for the playoffs, and if you remember my Super Bowl prediction going into the season, you'll kind of know where I'm leaning. But that doesn't mean that, I haven't thought about maybe changing it. Because I think the Eagles have just as good of a chance to win this game as the Chiefs do. And if you remember, the Eagles did go into Arrowhead last year, and they knocked off the Chiefs. Again, it's a new year. I get it. But they did do that recently. So, now it's on a neutral field. And Jalen Hurts played well in the Super Bowl the last time. And really, his fumble that led to a touchdown by Nick Bolton, that was a big difference in the game. That was a big difference. And, Kadarius Toney's punt return was a big difference too. So, and also I know people are saying, well, because the Eagles were slipping a lot in the last Super Bowl when they were playing it in Arizona. So maybe now being in New Orleans, that won't be the case. Different field. But, there's no excuse. The Eagles lost. Now, I know there was a controversial flag at the end of the game. I get it. But, like I've been saying since we talked about the AFC Championship game on Monday, games are defined by more than just a couple plays. So, like I said, Jalen Hurts fumbled the ball. That led to a touchdown. That was a big play in the game. And the Eagles also had a 10-point lead, right? In the game. And they let the Chiefs come back. Like, when Mahomes looked like, he was done for the game. Because I remember he was lying on the ground. He was in a lot of pain when he got tackled towards the end of the first half. In that moment, I thought the Chiefs were in trouble. But in the second half, they came out firing. And, ultimately they won the game. So, we'll see what happens, though. I know a lot of people are not happy with the matchup. I'm going to be constantly saying that, but let me tell you something. This is going to be a great game, believe me. This could be one of the best Super Bowls we've had. And, last year was good. When they met the first time, it was good. And the year before that, with the Rams and the Bengals, that was pretty good. So, obviously the COVID season, that was, the Bucs dominated the Chiefs. But we've had 3 entertaining Super Bowls in a row. So let's make it a 4th. But let me know what you guys think about what I had to say about the Eagles. Do you think the same? Do you think differently? Let me know in the comments. So we are going to take, before we go to break, my apologies. Before we go to break, just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day. So any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCpodcast.net. That is GSMCpodcast.net. So when we come back from our next break, we will talk about the New Orleans Saints. No, that's the 4th segment. We'll be talking about who is the biggest letdown in the playoffs this season. What teams, that made the playoffs just, their performance was disappointing. We'll go over that when we come back. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the third part of the show, we are going to talk about the playoff teams that were the most disappointing. And I'll just give you my thoughts on them. So, yeah, we got one game left, but I just wanted to revisit, some of the, pretty much all of the past playoff teams, but some of them are more disappointing than others. Obviously, I'm not disappointed in the Commanders. I mean, I guess maybe you could be disappointed in the Bills because they weren't able to knock off the Chiefs. But we'll start off with, we'll start from the beginning, the wild card round, and then work our way back. So I would say that, really, the teams that were the most disappointing were all the teams that were in the NFC North. This division was looked at as the best division in football all year. Because you had three teams that, made the playoffs. Two of them were playing against each other for the division, for the 1 seed. And you just thought that this division was going to maybe run the playoffs. And that just did not happen. With those three teams, how many playoff wins did they have combined? Zero. And I think the most disappointing, I would say it's the Lions. Just because you had a bye, you were the 1 seed, you had home field advantage, and you let the Commanders walk up and down the field all over you. And on top of that, they had 5 turnovers in the game? It was a fumble by Jared Goff, 3 interceptions. Jameson Williams threw an interception, which they should not have been running that play at that point in the game against the Commanders. That was bad. And on top of that, I don't think the Commanders punted until the fourth quarter. Jane Daniels and that offense had their way against the Lions. And, now they go into an offseason where they've lost both coordinators. It's going to be interesting how the Lions bounce back from this. But you thought a bye week would help them. And you could also point to, Jared Goff getting banged up in that game, taking that hit from Frankie Louvu on the pick 6. He could have been playing with a concussion. And that's why maybe, the turnovers continued. But, yeah, it was an overall a mess of a game for the Lions. The Vikings, they were never in their game. They weren't. At least with the Lions, the game went back and forth for a little bit, and then the Commanders took a commanding lead. I know I had to say that. That was a bad joke. But the Vikings, from start to finish in their game against the Rams, they never had a chance. Sam Darnold got sacked all over the place. The Rams had that impressive drive to open the game. There was never a point in that game where you thought, yeah, the Vikings got a shot. No. And this was coming off of that disappointing end to the regular season where, that game was close against the Lions, but then the Lions kind of pulled away. This game, it was pure domination. And it was a sour end to a very good season. Kevin O'Connell, he might be winning Coach of the Year. But, and also Sam Darnold, the year that he had. Now all of a sudden it's like, well, are the Vikings going to bring him back as their quarterback? What's going to happen there? Because these 2 games were true tests for Sam Darnold. And he did not deliver in either of them. He didn't. So now, what's going to happen there? We'll have to wait and see. And then also talking about the Packers. Now, their defense kept them in the game against the Eagles. If you look at the 3 games that the Eagles have played. Now, Saquon Barkley is at over 100 yards in each one. But the Packers, until the very end of the game, but, that was just to ice the game. The Packers did a good job at keeping themselves in the game. The problem is the offense could not generate any kind of momentum. Jordan Love had a disappointing day with the interceptions. Really the only one that showed up on offense was Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs had that hard run, that set up a touchdown on the next play. Their offense really just couldn't get anything going. But that's a credit to the Eagles' defense also, because the Eagles' defense is really good. But the Packers, this was a year that, I had high expectations for them based off of how Jordan Love finished out the season last year. And I was hoping for, a step up. Now, Jordan Love wasn't entirely healthy because he dealt with numerous injuries throughout the year. And he was a little banged up in this, in that game too. So, let's see what happens in year 3. Now being, the starting quarterback for the 3rd straight year. And the Packers, they have invested a lot in him. So he's got to deliver. But the Packers, they need to add to the offense, because going into the year you thought, all right, they're going to be okay because, they're like, we don't need a number 1 wide receiver because all these guys are equally talented and, well, maybe not equally talented, but they're all talented and we're going to spread the ball around. But they don't have that alpha receiver. We thought it was going to be Jaden Reed. I thought it was going to be Christian Watson because when Christian Watson's healthy, I think he's the best receiver on the team, but can't stay healthy. Romeo Doubs got banged up this year. It's just they need another wide receiver on that team. They need a true number 1 because that'll only make these receivers better. You got Josh Jacobs, who had a great year, and I think Jordan Love, this was just a down year. I think he'll bounce back, but they were pretty disappointing because I think if you have, and it didn't get off to a great start either because they fumbled the kickoff, even though you could see that Keyshawn Nixon looked like he recovered it, and the Eagles were up 7-0, in an eye blink. And if that doesn't happen, maybe the game plays out differently. But if the Packers were able to generate an offense in that game, they could have won it. They definitely could have won that game. That game was in reach. But they were disappointing. I guess when you look at the Steelers, they had a disappointing end to their season, but I think we all kind of knew that, when they had this late season collapse, going into Baltimore again, they weren't going to win the game. They weren't. The odds were stacked against them. The Ravens are a better overall team. The better team won. And the Steelers' offense was lethargic in the first half. And, in the second half, Russell Wilson made a couple of good throws and, they had a couple of scores late, but they never had a chance in that game. The Broncos got blown out by the Bills. I guess you could say it was a disappointment because, I expected there to be a little bit more fight from them. The game started out great. Bo Nix hits Troy Franklin for that touchdown on the first drive of the game, and you're thinking, here we go. And then the Bills just took over from there. For me, I just think the NFC North teams were the most disappointing. I'm trying to think of who else. The Commanders-Buccaneers game, that turnover by Baker Mayfield was a huge difference. He had a great year. But, like I said, I look at the NFC North teams. And then, actually, when we go into the divisional round, the Rams, they were in until the end. It looked like it was over after Barkley scored a second touchdown, but, the Rams had an opportunity to win that game at the very end. And I'm in agreement with people. If the weather didn't get as bad as it did, I think the Rams win that game. I really do believe that. But we'll never know. I think it's the Ravens. They were the biggest disappointment of the divisional round. They were. I forgot I didn't even talk about Chargers-Texans. I mean, I guess Justin Herbert as an individual, that was a disappointing performance, but, how that game played out, I look at it and I'm like, you know what, the Chargers, their flaws got exposed in the game. And I didn't expect the Texans to walk into Kansas City and beat the Chiefs. But back to the Ravens, that would be another disappointment. I mean, whoever lost that game, like if the Ravens won that game, then I'd be saying the Bills were a disappointment. But they didn't. The Ravens ended up losing. They were the disappointment. Lamar Jackson, 2 turnovers in the first half. One of them really made a difference because that led to points for Buffalo. And then you had, Lamar play a much better second half, but then Mark Andrews, he has that fumble that leads to points, and then you have the drop on the 2-point conversion. Can't happen. And the Ravens are a team that consistently makes the playoffs every year. And, this is another early playoff exit for him. Or was an early playoff exit for him. And, yeah, it's just, you were thinking maybe this was a year. Saying the same thing about Buffalo, too. But they were definitely a letdown. Again, you could make you could say the Bills were a letdown, but, I mean, Josh Allen and that offense, they played a good enough game where they could have won. But they didn't. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs made more plays than them in big moments. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on the playoff letdowns. Let me know what you guys think. What team was the biggest letdown in the postseason this year? Let me know in the comments. So we are going to take our next break, and then when we come back, we'll actually talk about the New Orleans Saints. Now we're going to talk about the Saints and their head coaching situation, because they are the only team that has not hired a head coach yet, and we'll talk about where that's kind of at the moment. So with that being said, stick around. And we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the fourth part of the show, we're going to get into the head coaching search for the Saints, how they are the only team left now that doesn't have a head coach, and who is possibly the leading candidate for this position. So, I did bring up Mike McCarthy before, and Mike McCarthy took himself out of the race for the Saints head coaching job. And that was someone that I was kind of advocating for, because I just thought, like, hey, he's the best candidate available. He's a proven head coach. I mean, I would bring him in. Well, now he took himself out. So it seems like the leading candidate at the moment, and I just saw he could be in the driver's seat, is the offensive coordinator for the Eagles, Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore could be getting that job. And the Saints, that's a job that was not coveted by many, it seems, because of just the situation that the Saints are in right now. Their cap situation, you got a lot of aging players on this team, on the defensive side of the ball, and Derek Carr has not panned out like they were hoping for. They're not in a good spot right now. They're not. And when you look at the division, the Bucs have found their quarterback. The Falcons, it looks like they have found their quarterback of the future. The Panthers beat the Saints second time around. I mean, the first game, the Saints blew them out. And then, they played each other again in Carolina, and the Panthers knocked them off. So it looks like Bryce Young is, could be heading in the right direction. So where does that leave the Saints? In last place. That's where it leads them. They have really failed to turn this thing around ever since Drew Brees retired. When Drew Brees walked out the door, this franchise has not been the same. Now, 2021, they did have an opportunity to still make the playoffs. They ended up going 9-8, but they ended up missing out. But it's just, then Sean Payton left, and Dennis Allen took over, and it just, it has not, hasn't gone well. Just hasn't. And, at the start of the year, the Saints won their first 2 games. Like I said, they destroyed the Panthers. They put up 40 points against them. They put up 40 points against the Cowboys at home. And I'll be honest, I was like, okay, maybe, the Saints are legit. But then we quickly found out it was a mirage. Because the Cowboys, they turned out not to be that good this year. And then when you saw the Saints go up against, the Eagles at home, they couldn't generate a lot of offense. Well, actually no, wasn't it the Eagles that put up a lot of total yards in the game? They put up one of them put up almost 500 total yards in the game, and I'll have to go back and look. Well, because the Eagles went for it on 4th down a handful of times, and they didn't convert. So let's go back quick. Let's fact check myself. So they met all the way back in week 3, and total yards. Yeah, the Eagles had 460 yards of total offense, and they only won by 3. And there was no A.J. Brown in the game, and I think Devontae Smith got hurt at one point, so it was Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley. That was his first big game. Actually, no, it was his second because he had the 3 touchdowns against the Packers in week 1. But he had that big 65-yard run, and he had over 140 yards rushing, 147 yards rushing, and if the Eagles would have converted on 4th down and they capitalized, that game could have been even uglier for the Saints. But anyways, got a little bit off topic there. We quickly realized that the Saints aren't that good. They still aren't that good. And they let go of Dennis Allen mid-season. Darren Rizzi, he takes over. They get that upset win against the Falcons at home. I saw Alvin Kamara, might be advocating for him to get the job, but the Saints just, like I said, they're just not. It's not a good spot. They're not in a good spot, and I honestly don't blame McCarthy for taking himself out because he just doesn't want to inherit that situation. But you do worry about McCarthy in the sense that what if the next go round, nobody takes him because he was out for a year again. Only time will tell. But yeah, I guess I don't blame him. It's just not an attractive place to go coach right now. Someone's got to take it. They're not going to go into the season without a coach. Kellen Moore maybe will take that opportunity because that's, a promotion for him. And, it gives him a chance to show what he could do as a head coach. It's just amazing if he ends up being a head coach. 'Cause I just remember him, being a backup quarterback for the Cowboys. And he was a southpaw. He was a lefty quarterback. And now he's a coordinator. And now he could be a head coach. But that's what happens, That's how the journey plays out for some people. But it's just, the Saints need more than stability at the head coach. They already traded Marshawn Lattimore in the middle of the year. I think some of these other players you could look to maybe moving off of, these veteran players. You got to tear it down because the Saints just did not. They didn't do that because they just kept in their minds believing that we're going to compete. Now they did finish. They did finish off 2023. They finished 9-8. They finished the season strong, but And like I said, they got off to a good start, but then just everything kind of fell apart. Derek Carr also got hurt. If Derek Carr didn't get hurt, I mean, maybe the Saints win a couple more games. But, it's just, they had a lot of injuries, too. I mean, Rashid Shaheed got hurt. Chris Olave got hurt. It's just, Derek Carr finished with 15 touchdowns to 5 picks. He missed a month of the season almost. And you had Spencer Rattler come in. But because like I said, they started off 2-0, and then they proceeded to lose their next 7 games. And then they won a couple games in a row against the Falcons and against the Browns. It's amazing. It's amazing that how high people were on the Saints after they went 2-0, and then everything just fell apart. But it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening. Whoever they end up hiring, it's not really gonna. I'm not really gonna be ecstatic for it because I still think the Saints are just kind of going to be in that no man's land. But they need that's a team that needs a total rebuild. Really. Maybe they move off of Derek Carr. I know there was some rumors out there that maybe Derek Carr could be moved, and I saw, I'm going to bring him up again, the Giants could be a possible destination for Derek Carr, which I don't think many people would be thrilled about that. I don't know. For me, I'd welcome it just because, I'd rather see, I honestly don't know. I'd rather, it's hard to say. It's honestly hard to say. It's hard to put into words. I don't know. Because what if we got Tyrod Taylor to start, or Tommy DeVito. It's not saying that much, but I'd rather see Derek Carr play than see Tommy DeVito or Tyrod Taylor basically. Because at least with Derek Carr, you might not win a lot of games, but you have a chance to win some games at least. Derek Carr has come a long way since 2016 when he had the MVP year, and he unfortunately got hurt during it, and he ended up breaking his leg against the Colts, and made the playoffs in 2021. It's and then Josh McDaniels benches him. And that's kind of how his Raiders tenure ends, and then he goes to the Saints, and just it's been a rough couple of years for Derek Carr. But like I said, if the Giants are desperate for a quarterback, I'm not really that against them bringing in Derek Carr if they wanted to. But I know my friends would probably be in a huge disagreement with me. Obviously the Giants, I think, need to draft a young quarterback, but Derek Carr could be that bridge. So, but, whatever ends up happening, the Saints will have a head coach at some point. They will. We have Dean Cloud in the chat saying, Shoddy the one-man party. Okay. Nice. Anyways, we'll see. If Kellen Moore wants to take that job, I guess he'll have it. But we will have to wait and see. I saw that Cliff Kingsbury, he's going to stay with Washington. He's not going anywhere. And, I think that's a smart move. He could be taking the same approach that Ben Johnson took where, you want to be sure that you're ready to take on another opportunity. Cliff Kingsbury has already been a head coach. But, stay with Jane Daniels for now. They were just coming off of a incredible season that not many people expected. So, But yeah, he's off the board. McCarthy is going to be out of coaching for a year. So we'll see what the Saints end up doing. But like I said, they got a lot of work to do besides head coach. So we'll see if they, make any more trades this offseason, if people retire. I mean, Cameron Jordan could retire. I saw that was on the table, but we'll have to wait and see. But let me know what you guys think. Who ultimately gets the Saints job? Do you think it ends up being Kellen Moore? Do you think it's somebody else? Let me know in the comments. So we are going to take our final break of the show now. And then when we come back, we will discuss the Pro Bowl rosters. There's been some changes because not everybody that gets voted into the Pro Bowl ends up going to the Pro Bowl. So we'll just take a look at the rosters. I'll give you my thoughts, and that is how we will end off the show for today. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the final part of the show, we're just going to take a look at the Pro Bowl rosters. Who is going to the Pro Bowl this year? For the Pro Bowl games, I should say. I mean, it's not, the traditional, four-quarter game that we're used to. There's skills challenges. There's, now it's flag football. So let's kind of take a look, shall we? So we'll start with the AFC. So there's going to be no Josh Allen, no Lamar Jackson. They were replaced by Russell Wilson and Drake May. And then you got Joe Burrow. Running backs, there'll be no Derrick Henry. I think James Cook is replacing him. You got Joe Mixon, Jonathan Taylor, Patrick Ricard, Jamar Chase, who had an unbelievable year. Joe Burrow had an unbelievable year too, which, it's just unfortunate that the Bengals didn't make the playoffs. But, Jamar Chase won the Triple Crown. You got Jerry Jeudy, who had a very good first season with the Browns as one of the lone bright spots of the team. You had Nico Collins and Brian Thomas Jr., who was a bright spot for the Jaguars in 2024. He replaces Zay Flowers. Tight ends, you got Brock Bowers. Unbelievable year for him. Again, lone bright spot of the Raiders in a tough year for them. Jonnu Smith replaced Travis Kelce. Jonnu Smith was good for the Dolphins. And the Dolphins had a rough year, with Tua getting hurt. And he really developed into a nice weapon for them. So, he replaces Travis Kelce, obviously, with Kelce playing in the Super Bowl. Then you got Deion Dawkins of the Buffalo Bills, Rashawn Slater, Ronnie Stanley. He replaced Laramie Tunsil. Offensive guards, you got Quinn Nelson of the Colts. Joel Bitonio with the Browns. He replaces Joe Thuney. And Isaac Seumalo with the Steelers. He replaces Trey Smith. So obviously playing in the Super Bowl. And then Tyler Linderbaum of the Ravens is replacing... he made it, but also there's a replacement that is needed for Creed Humphrey because, again, he is playing in the Super Bowl. Then you got Myles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson, Danielle Hunter of the Texans replacing Max Crosby. He had a good year for the Texans. First year with the Texans. You got Cam Hayward, Matabuke with the Ravens, Quinnen Williams with the Jets replacing Chris Jones, Nick Bonito with the Broncos, Kyle Van Noy of the Ravens replacing TJ Watt, and then Joey Bosa replacing his teammate Khalil Mack. You got Roquan Smith and Zaire Franklin, and then you got Derek Stingley, Patrick Surtain, Marlon Humphrey, Denzel Ward, Minka Fitzpatrick, Kyle Hamilton, Derwin James, and yeah, that's and then special teams. You got the Jaguars long snapper Ross Manisic. He's the one name that I cannot pronounce. Logan Cook of the Jaguars. So yeah, Jaguars special teams representing. You got Boswell of the Steelers. I mean, Chris Boswell. He had a great year for them. He was one of the best kickers. Marvin Mims had a good year, good second year with the Broncos. And then Miles Killebrew with the Steelers. So that's the AFC. Then you got Jared Goff, Jaden Daniels, and Sam Darnold. Well-deserved for all three of them. Running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Jacobs. Bijan Robinson replaced Saquon. Kyle Juszczyk. I mean, he's always making it as a fullback. Good player for the Niners. Justin Jefferson. I mean, he had a really good year once again. With the new quarterback, Terry McLaurin had his best season with Jaden Daniels. He's in it. Malik Neighbors actually replaced Amon-Ra St. Brown. Mike Evans replaced CeeDee Lamb, both of those guys. Neighbors had a good year. I mean, look at the quarterbacks that he had to play with. And, you know, he still put together a solid rookie season. Mike Evans, 11 years of over 1,000 yards. And we'll see if he can go for 12 next year. Then you got George Kittle, who's always there. Trey McBride. The Cardinals, Tristan Wirfs, Brian O'Neill replacing Lane Johnson. Taylor Decker replacing his teammate Penei Sewell. Offensive guards, you got Tyler Smith of the Cowboys, Chris Lindstrom of the Falcons, Robert Hunt of the Panthers replacing Landon Dickerson. Center, you got the Lions' Frank Ragnow, Eric McCoy of the Saints replacing Cam Jurgens, who's playing in the Super Bowl. Defensive ends, you got Nick Bosa, Micah Parsons, and Rashawn Gary. Dexter Lawrence, Vita Vea, and Leonard Williams replacing Jalen Carter. Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Jared Verso, a couple of Vikings and a Ram. Fred Warner, Bobby Wagner replacing Zach Bond. Jalen Johnson, Byron Murphy, J.C. Horn, Devon Witherspoon, Xavier McKinney, Budda Baker, and Brian Branch. And then you have Andrew DePaula for the Vikings, long snapper. Jack Fox, punter for the Lions. And then Brandon Aubrey had another great year for the Cowboys. Cavante Turpin for the Cowboys, he was good on special teams this year. Also had that... Actually, no, that was on special teams. That long touchdown against the Commanders. That was a return. Kadero Hodge of the Falcons. He also made it as well. I hope that I got all of them and there wasn't any more replacements. But those are the rosters. I mean, all well deserved. All well deserved. My thing is just the Pro Bowl just doesn't do it for me. You know, and I know they're trying to do something different, and they're trying to, I guess, in a way, appease the players. You know, because I mean, watching the traditional game, I mean, it hasn't really been good. The best version of the Pro Bowl for me, and I talked about this on previous shows. I know I definitely did that. I thought the best format for me was when they did the fantasy drafts. I honestly thought that was the best format. When you had two Hall of Famers draft teams and then they played against each other. But the other thing, too, is with the Pro Bowl, the best players usually don't go. Now, obviously, there are very good players. You know, there are some of the best players here. But the best of the best is not always there. You know, because sometimes they're playing in the Super Bowl. Or sometimes they just choose not to go. I mean, Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, they'd always be voted into the Pro Bowl, but most of the time they don't go. Well, Tom Brady also was playing Super Bowls. And Aaron Rodgers has played in the Pro Bowl. Just there have been years where he hasn't. But, you know, I mean, Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry aren't going. You know, Josh Allen's not going. I mean, they could very easily be like, yeah, we'll go. But you know what? They're also coming off of, you know, the grind of the season. And, you know, I mean, they both suffered some tough playoff losses here. So, you know, you kind of get it from that perspective, if that's how they're feeling. not to, they don't feel like they want to go. So, yeah, I mean, look, I don't blame anybody for not going. It's just, there's been years where, like, we see Tyler Huntley ended up going to the Pro Bowl. Tyler Huntley? Because he was backing up Lamar Jackson and he played in a playoff game for them. He ended up making the Pro Bowl. Like, it's crazy. But that's just how it is now. So, I mean, I'm not going to be, maybe I'll, like, flip it on for a second, see what's up. I feel like, we talk about Chiefs fatigue, and no offense to them because I love both of them, but I feel like people are going to be suffering, and they probably already have, from the Manning brothers fatigue. Because Peyton Manning is in a ton of commercials. Now you got the Kick of Destiny 3 with Peyton and Eli going at it. They do the Manning cast, and now, they're last couple of years now they've been doing the Pro Bowl. The Manning brothers are everywhere. So, at some point, this way of doing the Pro Bowl is, they might have to do away with it. But honestly, what they could do is, because they put this on, smacked in the middle of the championship games, and then you got the bye week, and then you got the Super Bowl. But maybe, because then, if some of the players that haven't elected to go to the Pro Bowl, maybe they change their mind if it's after the Super Bowl. And maybe you get the players that are playing in the Super Bowl, maybe you get them to play in it afterwards. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. If you held the Pro Bowl to after the Super Bowl. I don't think they're going to do that. But they also want to have something, at least in between the championship games and the Super Bowl. So, I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. But, yeah, I mean, you look at the rosters. Like I said, does Drake May really deserve to be a Pro Bowler? He was good. Look, not saying he was bad. I'm just saying, like, does he deserve to be a Pro Bowler? Does Russell Wilson deserve to be a Pro Bowler when he played, like, he didn't even play the whole year? Again, put up solid numbers, but I don't know. Like, when you look at the other All-Star games, the best players are always going. But that's because they're having them in the middle of the year. The All-Star game for baseball, the All-Star game for the NBA, the All-Star game for NHL. The best players usually go. For the NFL, because they hold it, smacked in the middle of the playoffs, or towards the end of the playoffs, it's the best players sometimes just don't go. Or for the most part, just don't go. So, I don't know. That's just me. But, yeah. So, those are the rosters. Like I said, I might turn it on for a little bit, but, yeah, I'm not going to be locked into that. Actually, we'll not really answer another comment, but we'll acknowledge a comment. So, JHIXX, he said that Kellen Moore is going to be the next Saints head coach. So, we're in agreement there. We'll see what happens. But it seems like, because I saw a headline that said, he might be in the driver's seat. But, like I said, someone's got to take that job. So, but that is pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. As I always say, make sure to check out all the other shows as well. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the video. Greatly appreciate it. We're also on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you type in GSMC, type in GSMC Football Podcast, you will get results on that. So if you want to listen to the podcast, you can do that. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the show, and we will be back again tomorrow. So as always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and like I said, I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.